On today's episode of the Frame by Frame podcast, episode 2, I sit down with YouTuber and video editor Daniel Netzel. Daniel runs a YouTube channel with 130,000 subscribers, and honestly, in my opinion, is one of the best editors on YouTube. His understanding of video editing and storytelling is absolutely remarkable, and I'm super excited to get in today's episode, dive into his thought process, and talk about editing, freelancing, and more. So sit back, grab a cup of coffee, relax, and enjoy today's episode. So how did you get started into editing first of all? And what are some of your editing, how did you get to your editing journey so far?
Sure. So I started off doing vlogs years and years and years ago, and just kind of learned how to use Premiere in the most basic sense to do those, because that was back when the jump cuts were the huge thing. So that was the extent of my knowledge on video editing until 2015, when I discovered every frame of painting, and I decided that, I wanted to give my own hand at making these kinds of video essays about movies, TV, whatever. And that was kind of when I really opened into looking up a bunch of YouTube tutorials and doing my own just experimentation, just kind of clicking around and seeing what happened because I didn't have any formal training. Uh, and so just kind of trial by error and started making videos for another new channel, new at the time, called Film Radar, which I started 2016, something like that. And just kind of kept going from there and learning as I went and kept picking up, other freelance gigs along the way. Eventually started working for Tyler
Right.
Mowry in 2020, I think.
Okay, cool.
It's been a few years now.
Yeah. Awesome, man. That's super cool. So your YouTube channel started off as Film Radar, but you
Mhm.
rebranded, right? Because now it's your name.
Yeah, yeah. I ended up switching it just to my name because eventually, kind of going to be branching out into doing other non-video essay, non-film related stuff. And
Okay, cool.
I just feel like it made sense, to just go by my name for, whatever I choose to release at some point.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I went through your channel like a week or two ago,
Nice.
and I saw one of the videos you were talking about. It was tough because, the YouTube algorithm doesn't always favor less
Yeah.
uploads but more quality uploads,
Mhm.
especially in the video essay world.
Yeah.
But I've worked on video essays before, and they're definitely like a monster to edit.
Yeah.
But are you still trying to focus more on video essays with your channel, or what's your kind of
So for the
going forward with that?
Yeah, so for the YouTube channel, for sure, it's mostly going to be video essays. The hope is to kind of expand into more music stuff, which I've been doing for a while, but behind the scenes, I haven't really posted
Cool.
anything. And eventually, I want to get into short filmmaking and stuff like that, and I will probably post that to the channel, but that won't be kind of the main focus ever. I can't see anyways. I have too much fun making the video essays, and I feel like it's such a malleable type of video
Mhm.
that it's only limited by what you think of it as. Like a video essay can
Yeah.
be a million different things. And so I feel like I'll never run out of stuff to be passionate about, stuff to innovate or hopefully, try new things within that genre. And the biggest thing that I want to do is branch out to covering more subjects. Because it's pretty much been 99% film TV this far. And so video games, talking about just more general concepts of art or filmmaking or things like that rather than picking one movie at a time, because that's kind of been the template I stuck to for a long time, and that's something also I'm trying to explore changing a little bit. We'll see how that
Right.
goes. For sure the next lineup are still kind of classic, but mostly at this point, because yeah, you mentioned this other video I made, and basically I had to just come to terms with the fact that you can't really take 2 3 months to make a video. It doesn't really matter how good it is. If the algorithm doesn't pick it up, if Reddit doesn't pick it up, it just kind of dies wherever it's at. And so it is just more important to get some sense of consistency. And so that's kind of the stage that I'm in right now, is just trying to get a really good rotation of writing and editing and overlapping projects so I can get stuff out faster.
Right. Yeah, I've been studying a lot of just about YouTube, like retention and like the average view duration and kind of that kind of
Hmm.
stuff. And I feel like some of the most popular content right now is I mean, obviously they have teams to do it, but people like Johnny Harris, you know what I mean, who come out with really quality content but
Hmm.
consistently.
Yeah.
And that, of course, is just ridiculously hard to do unless you have help. But
Hmm.
because your videos are super quality, like your editing
Thank
is
you.
really, really good.
Thank you,
Uh,
man.
but I look at that sometimes and I'm like, I remember I messaged you once. I was like, dude, do you
Yeah.
have an editing course? Because your editing's like out of this world.
Thank you, man. I appreciate
So
that.
on that topic, what is your
Hmm.
editing process look like,
Yeah.
especially for one of those type of videos?
So the thing that I kind of always challenged myself to do was never to just fall into a template. Like I felt like that was one of the ways that I was trying to stand out. Like even the channels that I really admired, like Lessons from the Screenplay, they had their aesthetic, they figured it out, and then they just kept to it. Like the same font, same color scheme, same kind of
Right.
display of information. And so every time I really tried to kind of start from scratch all over again. And usually the methodology was like to try and mimic whatever movie I was talking about. So like in my Matrix video, lots of greens. I use like the rain code as like a transition and stuff like
Right.
that. And then it was really just a matter of like I start with the script. That's kind of always where everything gets built from, and I do my best to try and think visually while I'm writing. Like instead of just treating it as like a blog post with like video running over it, to have it
Right.
really marry together, and you do stuff visually that is integrally like related to what the writing itself was. And then I go through with like, because it's always voiceover dominant, the types of
Hmm.
videos I make, so I find that rhythm first. Is like kind of how I've always done things, because I think that that's even more than visually, that's like the stuff that people really focus on, is like the words and the cadence and the pace of that. So I try to get that rhythm feeling right. And then I start to kind of go in and layer in like the video on top of it. And anything that I don't know how to do, I just go onto YouTube and I'm like, how do I make like a TV effect, or,
Right.
anything that you could
Okay.
ever
Cool.
want. And, I've yet to find something that's like impossible to do or
Right.
impossible to find some tutorial for.
Do you ever come across like, because you have some really cool like transitions where you don't, they're very subtle in the sense that like you don't know they're transitions, but they just
Mm.
feel cool. But like when you transition through something, like I've seen a couple really cool transitions on your channel, like almost like Sam Colder-esque type of
Oh,
transitions, but
sure.
like for film essays.
Mm.
Do you ever come across situations where like you can't find a tutorial for that, or like and you just kind of have to figure it out?
Well, so as far as like most of the subtle transitions, it's less like the technical challenge of pulling it off and more like the design creativity of like how to meld it together, if that makes sense.
Interesting. Okay.
Um, so because my main influence for that stuff is a channel called Captain Christian. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but uh,
No, I haven't.
he's definitely worth checking out. He doesn't post as consistently as he used to, but his whole backlog is amazing. And he always had these really creative transitions. Uh, you know, one that I can think about right now is like he had a video on Pokemon where like Pikachu kind of runs across the screen dragging a line, and then that line turns into like the center line of a Pokeball, and then the colors come in to be like a Pokeball, and it's like, oh. But see, so doing something like that isn't necessarily really difficult. It's coming up with the
Right.
idea of like, ooh, how do I tether these images together? So that
Okay.
is the thing that I've struggled with. And usually that just comes from like you pick your moments. Like I had one uh, in a video I made about Doctor Sleep where there's like a transition between there's like a shot from the latest It adaptation where the balloon kind of comes over Pennywise's face, and so I used that as like a wipe transition
Right.
because it was like almost there already. Like I had to cheat it a little bit,
Exactly.
I had to zoom a little
Yeah.
bit, but like since the balloon is already covering most of it, it was like it just lent itself perfectly to be that like wipe transition.
Totally.
Hmm.
And do you usually like those with that kind of part of the edit? Do you usually script that in the script, or do you just do it like while you're actually in the editing bay? Do you come up with those ideas?
It depends. It's like a pretty good split, honestly, where half of the time as I'm writing, I get that inspiration and I just know. I'm
Okay.
like, ooh, this would be a really cool idea to try to do. But a lot of the time, it just comes from like sorting through, getting everything organized for the edit. And then I like combing through all this footage and I'm like, oh, hey, that might be something that I could work with.
So,
But it's a good blend. Yeah.
right. So how long does it usually take you to like, I mean, I know that this is a loaded question as an
Yeah.
editor myself,
Yeah.
but how long does like one of those video essays usually take you like for your channel?
So, well, that's part of the thing that I've been working on changing, because the short answer is too long for the longest time. So the one that kind of was the death rattle for that process was my video on Under the Silver Lake, which I posted a
Okay.
few months ago, and
Hmm.
that was, I mean, granted, I haven't been like a full-time YouTuber ever really, so I'm always juggling other freelance and stuff like that, but. Uh, it was about a month and a half for
Okay.
like writing and researching, and then about 2 months for the edit. Uh,
Awesome.
yeah, and granted, that was like a 23-minute video, something like that.
Yeah, when video essays get long like that, it definitely takes a long time, especially when it's
Yeah.
yours, because
Hmm.
you want like you become a perfectionist with your own
Oh,
work
yeah.
versus freelance work. So,
Oh, yeah.
and are you for all the software geeks out there, you're using Premiere Pro and After Effects?
Yeah.
Have
And I
you ever
never
tried
use
playing?
like, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, have you ever tried using anything else?
So I have the Adobe Creative Suite and I've played around a little bit, but I really don't understand or like Illustrator. I never have.
Yeah.
It feels like once you learn Photoshop, everything is ass backwards in Illustrator
Yeah.
and just doesn't make any sense to me. I've used it before, like if you really need to get, that clean rasterized image, but other than that, it's I use Photoshop for all my thumbnails, Premiere for all like the actual core editing, and then anytime any text, any transitions, masking, any of that kind of stuff, I always do in After Effects and just kind of
And
pop them in and out.
have you ever tried DaVinci Resolve or Final Cut Pro?
No, I should probably try Final Cut. I don't know much about DaVinci, but I've heard Final Cut kind of fixes everything we hate about Premiere. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Because I was using Premiere. I still do use Premiere, but for a
Mhm.
long time, and I was getting so frustrated because it would take me so long just to do like, I have a pretty beefed out Mac too, and it would just take
Mhm.
me forever for simple things. So I gave Final Cut Pro a try, and
Okay.
it is really underrated. Like it's
Yeah.
a very, very, very powerful like NLE, especially if you have third-party plugins.
Mm.
So, like, there's certain text animations that I've done in After Effects.
Mhm.
It'll take, unless they're already like a template that you have, but like building it from scratch will take, it'll take a little bit versus
Yeah.
Final Cut. They have like similar templates. It's like just drag and drop. It's crazy.
Oh,
So now
beautiful.
I toggle between the two, but
Okay.
I think it also depends what you're trying to do because in After
Mhm.
Effects, there's a lot of things that you can pull off that you can't pull off in something like Final Cut Pro.
Mhm. I really haven't even looked into it, so I'm not sure like what the capabilities would be. Mostly it's just the fact that it was what was around when I first started getting into it. You basically had either like iMovie or Premiere. And
Right.
between those two, the choice was obvious.
Yeah.
And then I've just kind
It,
of I've gotten comfortable with it and I've learned it so much, like all the hotkeys, and there is definitely that
yeah, exactly.
intimidation factor of like, oh, do I really want to learn a whole new thing? But I'll definitely
Yeah.
give it a look and see because there are a lot of issues I have with Premiere.
Yeah.
Most notably recently, and I think this is something people constantly post about, but just like how often when you're working with like different frame rates, it just cannot handle it. So if you're getting a
It's
bunch of different footage from different sources, like you have to convert everything to the same, or Premiere has a conniption.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's literally been driving me nuts
Yeah.
working with Premiere lately. It's I've been getting
Yeah.
every single error you can get.
Oh man.
Um, so when it comes to your editing like
Mhm.
process, how much of a role does storytelling play in your edits?
I would say like 90, 95%, I think it's everything to making the
Awesome.
edit. And I mean, that to me does start in the script, at least the way I do things. So I think it definitely, changes depending on what kind of content you're making. Like some people just don't even have a script when they make content, but I
Yep,
still think like in
exactly.
the edit, there is a story to be found. And I think that that's the way that you keep people more than there's only so much you can do to really make an edit feel super professional or fancy or
Yeah.
whatever. You know, like we all have the same tools, and if you're just really like cutting and moving footage, like it is all in the emotion and the pacing and like creating that need to keep watching, which I don't think any of us have like a perfect grasp on, but that is,
I agree.
that's like the feel that you develop the more you
Yeah,
do it.
I agree.
Hmm.
I agree completely. And every time I talk to like a newer editor who just like focuses so much on the technical side of things, I always say like, especially if you have an opportunity to like consult or work with the person you're freelancing or the script
Hmm.
yourself, it's really important, in my opinion, to like have at least, a couple story beats that kind of tie the story all together, even for
Yeah.
a YouTube video, even if it's a vlog,
Hmm. Totally.
any
Yeah.
any kind of YouTube video you can, just try to piece it together with story beats. Because like if you look at, I mean, some of the biggest YouTubers, like right now, I think of Mr. Beast or like
Hmm.
Eric or something. If you really pay attention to their videos, they always have story beats that they hit,
Yeah.
and like their retention's off the charts because they're constantly re-engaging you with every single one of those story beats.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, if you really
So
break down like the technicals of a Mr. Beast video, there's really nothing crazy happening in the edit. He's
there's
got
not.
text on
Yeah,
screen, clean cuts, like, but it's the way he compiles it together to tell that story, you know.
exactly.
Hmm.
Exactly. It's completely true. So how long have you been freelancing for as an editor? Because you're a freelance editor, right?
Hmm. Yeah, so I kind of right now I'm like split income of, my own YouTube stuff and then the freelance, and it's been that way. Like basically when I started doing my own channel, I was working as a barista at Starbucks, and I ended up going to like better coffee shops, but still same job, barely any more
Right.
pay. And then after like 2 years, I think on YouTube. That was kind of my entry point into any of the world of freelance. I've been fortunate in that way that like pretty much every job I've ever had has been approached to me rather than
That's
me
awesome.
having to seek it out. So, and that's pretty much just how it's been is like, I like working with other people and I definitely need the supplement to the income.
Hmm.
And then it's just, putting my own stuff out there. I have my business email and my website and stuff. So I've had people reach out and I've done a bunch of random gigs. But like Tyler's by far the most like steady freelance thing I've had.
Okay.
Hmm.
Okay. So you've never really gone out and like reached out to freelancers. You've always had them kind of come to you.
Pretty much. I have played the
Okay.
game of like, going on Upwork or whatever, but I never really was able to build like that's like its whole own ecosystem that you
Yeah.
have to target. And so like bringing in even a good portfolio, like it doesn't really mean anything until you build it through Upwork. And
Right.
I've reached out just on a personal basis, like through email, through Twitter, for a few other things here and there, but usually people that I kind of am already familiar with. Like I've done a lot of freelance work with other colleagues in the video essay field. Um,
Okay. Cool.
like written scripts for a few other guys, edited videos, done motion graphics. I've kind of done like a little bit of everything. I've done like freelance thumbnails. The most recent of which he's been popping off. I haven't done all of them, but I did like
Right.
dozen or so, 20 maybe, thumbnails for a channel called Magnates Media. Uh,
Okay. Cool.
and that was really cool to work with because totally different style. And
Right.
it felt good to, like rise to that challenge and tackle something totally outside of my comfort zone. And they worked out pretty well. Some of the thumbnails on there have, gotten like millions of views for those videos.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's super cool. So when you're editing or focusing on a script or working on a
Hmm.
thumbnail, do you like, because well, first off, the first question to this is you only really edit for YouTubers, right?
Pretty much, yeah. It's just kind of worked out that way that that's how people find me. I have done a couple other like startups too. I've reached out over the years. Like there was a company called Bubble Up
Okay.
that we're kind of building out this. I don't even know how to like kind of like a Pinterest board, but in their own version. And I did some like
Right.
blog write up kind of stuff for them.
Mhm.
But usually mostly YouTubers for sure.
Okay, cool. So when working on the thumbnails for the edits or scripts or whatever,
Hmm.
do you focus much on like what YouTube wants, like retention or like how making a certain cut here because how it might affect engagement, and then because of that you let that influence you, or is it more you're focused more on just like the fundamentals of storytelling, kind of getting through the edit?
I personally, and I don't know if this is the right or wrong approach, but it's just what I've like naturally kind of been inclined to do is just trust instinct more than anything. Because I've tried to like bury myself in analytics and learn as much as I can, but I never really found like clear methodology from just looking at analytics. Like I think to a certain extent, you just have to understand that, like no matter what you do, not every video is going to be interesting to everybody. And at least the way that I approach things, I've always kind of been comfortable being in the niche.
Hmm.
Like I totally respect and admire the people who, like Mr. Beast are like, I want to reach as
Right.
many people as possible. And I think there's a very different way that you have to approach things if you want
Yeah.
that. But I think there's something to be said for just like carving out your own little piece of something on the internet. And for me, doing that has always just been like trusting myself, like trying to make something I would want to watch, something I'd be interested in, paying attention to the things that bother me when I'm watching other video essays, like
Right.
places that I feel like they lag, and then I kind of take that stuff and internalize it and try to keep that ringing throughout as I'm writing, as I'm editing. But I really do think it's just about like I've been doing it for so many years that it is just like a
Yeah.
natural feeling that I have at this point, and I feel confident in that at least because where I even started this influence was film editors, and
Right.
whenever you watch interviews with any of the greats, like they always tell you the same thing. It really is just feel. There's no science to it. You just have to trust that you can follow your own artistic
Right.
guts and it'll work out.
Totally.
Yeah.
Definitely. So right now, your YouTube channel is sitting at, I believe it's 130,000 subscribers, and
Hmm.
you've had famous people, like Edgar Wright, I believe. What was it? He retweet or he tweeted
Uh,
one of your videos or
yeah,
something.
yeah.
So getting to that point, because for a lot
Mhm.
of people, there are a lot of people who really would love to build their YouTube to that level.
Hmm.
What's been like the emotional struggles or roller coasters that you've gone through
Oh
building your
yeah.
YouTube channel to that?
Oh man, how long is this podcast? I could talk. I could write a whole series of novels on the struggles, man. The truth is, it is tough, and I wish more people were honest about that side of it. Because I think too often you hear the success stories from the people who, not that they didn't put in the work, but they got that kind of lucky spark earlier on,
Totally.
or,
Yeah.
and so I think we lose a lot of the stories of what it is for the average person. And it's like, what you hear if you follow like stand-up comedians at all, like you kind of have to cut your teeth for years and years before anyone gets what you're doing. Sorry, I don't know if I can curse. But you know what I mean? Like you get rejected a lot, you deal with a lot of disappointment, a lot of frustration, but I think the best thing that I could say for anyone hoping to build a YouTube channel is to to stay as true to what you're passionate about as possible because if you're interested in it someone else will be and if you're just trying to chase a trend or trying to emulate some other YouTuber that is really successful, if it's not true to you, you're going to get bored of it, you're going to lose the spark, you're going to lose the motivation because then it's just like a job, it's just a chore. And you can't really treat YouTube like a regular job in that way because it won't pay you a penny for a long time when you're starting your own channel. And even more so now because I started long enough ago that it was before the partnership change. So I was like YouTube partner just because I wasn't, like a bot essentially. But
Right.
now there's like the new requirements for like watch time, subscriber counts, and that makes it even harder to get to. And I mean, like I feel bad for the people who, you have 100 subscribers, but then you post a viral video, it gets 5 million views, and you don't see a penny of it. Like that wouldn't have happened to me. And not that that did happen. I didn't have a viral
Right.
video, but if it did,
Right.
everything's changing. And so I think the truth is, as long as you love it and are doing it for those reasons, like there's nothing wrong with wanting to make money out of it. You have to, but that is going to be the
Totally.
struggle is you won't for a while. And even when you start, it's not going to be consistent because there's the sea change of, one YouTuber makes a really controversial video and ads plummet on the entire platform. They move with the seasons, like you'll make more during the holidays than you make during the summer or whatever. And there's all sorts of stuff that goes into, just building it. And so I would just say find a rhythm that works for you, find what you love, and be open to making income, but don't put your eggs in one basket because they're all fluctuating all the time.
That's really good advice. And I think you have a really interesting perspective on it too, because like you said, like there are the YouTubers who like one day I'll see them, they're like, oh, that was a good video, but they're
Mhm.
fairly new. And then like a month later, they'll be like 500,000 subs
Yeah,
and they just kind of like got lucky or hit that spark.
yeah.
Whereas I feel like with your channel, it was really just like pure talent and grit because you've been making
Hopefully,
really
talent.
quality video. You've been making really quality videos for a long time now.
Mhm.
And like you're at the 130,000 subscribers, which is a lot. But I mean, did you ever have any videos that like went crazy viral that like made you hit that spark that really helped out?
So the first thing that ever happened that really made me feel like it was possible was a video doing pretty well on Reddit. And it got to like 40,000 views on YouTube, which to any small YouTuber knows that's huge. When you're like eking out like 50 views at most, and then you have something hit 40K, it's like, Mr. Beast, look out, I'm coming for you. Like it feels really, really good. And, and then it didn't happen again for a long time, but I still had that drive, just knowing that if I did it once, I could do it again. And I think you have to have that like inherent belief in yourself, because
Yeah.
sometimes you'll try everything, you'll put your best work out there and it won't hit, and sometimes you'll put out something that you were like kind of unsure about and it becomes your most
Mhm.
popular video. And,
Totally.
but I think
I've
the
seen that
biggest
too.
turning point was just hitting like 10,000 subscribers because that felt to me like, especially as a guy who started watching YouTube in like 2007, like 10,000 always seemed like the good threshold of like, this is not a failure of my dream. Like, it's not huge, it's
Right.
not popping off, I'm not a millionaire, but it's something that
Right.
tells you you're on the right track.
Yeah, because I just started really focusing on being more consistent on YouTube and putting
Hmm.
out content. I have this podcast on my channel, but I also started putting out content just about like, you know, being an editor and editing tips and things like that. And
Hmm.
I think the things that I focus on, like the three questions I ask myself before I get started, is definitely like, is this something that excites me? Is it something that I see helping people, other people like in my shoes?
Hmm.
And does it like have, is there any little bit of virality there? Because at the end of the day, like you do want it to get somewhere.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that the two, to your point, like the two first main benchmarks, definitely for me are like, okay, hit 1,000 subscribers, and then after that, the next benchmark's like 10,000,
Hmm.
and then onward.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah. So what's something that you think like if someone was, interviewing you and they were new to editing, what's something that you think all editors should know or like keep in mind getting into editing?
Uh, I think just keeping an open mind. I think that like there are trends that come and go, and often what I've noticed from watching a lot of like, because I used to participate a lot more than I do now, but once upon a time I was pretty active on like these different subreddits for smaller YouTubers, people trying to figure it out, and like, a place to offer your videos to get critiqued, and then you would critique other people's and stuff like that. This one, NewTubers is a good subreddit for anyone looking into that stuff. And I think it's really important to like find your own voice, which is a lot harder to do than it sounds like. And,
Yeah.
you don't right away. Like inevitably, I think everyone who's getting started will like whether intentionally or completely subconsciously, you will copy people, and you kind of have to learn to put that to bed. And I think the other harsh truth is to understand that you're going to suck when you first start, and don't take it personally. Because I found that was probably the most common thing was someone would put out their video and, like, hey, tell me what's wrong with it. Like, I can take it. And then people break it down for them. Like, you got to frame the camera better, cut out more of the downtime, the dead air. And then they just like shut down. They take that criticism. They're like, I'm useless. And then they give up. And you can learn from that. Like you can grow from the criticism, and no one's good at this stuff when they first start. So I think the
Yeah.
best thing is just to get a thick skin and know that like people are going to be mean sometimes, people are going to have harsh words, but if they're coming from like a genuine place, like if it's not just like, hey, shut up, idiot, if they have
Yeah.
real critiques, try to listen to it, and see if you can implement that when you make another video.
Yeah, that's a really interesting piece of advice, actually. Basically, like, don't take offense to revisions too
Yeah.
much. But I do think revisions, especially when starting out, are very, very important because,
Hmm.
like you said, it really helps you gauge, like, okay, I need to do this, but you need to be able to like learn from it, like you said.
Hmm.
Because there's been a few sets of revisions in the past that I've gotten from certain clients, and I was like so offended. I was like, what?
Oh, well,
But
and in that case, when it comes to like client freelance stuff, sometimes they're going to be wrong, and you just have to do it because they're in charge. There are times where
yeah,
people will ask for a change that in your gut is like, and you can express that all you want, and you should, but at the end of the
yeah.
day, it's their choice, and your job is to provide for their vision, and
Exactly. Exactly. That is one hard thing about being like a creative freelancer
yes, yeah.
because there are times where you're like I know you're so wrong here, but you just have to do it.
Mhm.
So, what your journey going forward from here? Are you going to, what's your plans? Are you focusing more on freelance work or more on kind of the YouTube thing?
Definitely more on the YouTube thing. No offense to Tyler or any of the other freelance stuff that I
Yeah,
do. I love all those guys and I love, being a part of it. But I've always felt for me that like freelance is great for people who just really like the craft of editing and like being a part of a team and all that stuff. But I always wanted to be the one like with the vision, to
totally.
to pick the topic, to pick the thing, and to like really make whatever I want to make. And since I've never really struggled, if anything, like the hard thing is picking the idea out of the million that I have to like dedicate the time and the effort to. So that is the main goal is, and I've gotten like a lot of progress on a few other videos and shaking things up and how I approach everything. Like the last video I made came together really fast compared to what I normally do. Like the Under the Silver Lake video I made took like 3.5 months, and this that I just made on The Last of Us took like 2 weeks. So
Awesome. Which was a great
huge
video, by the way.
progress. Oh, thank you, man. I'm still hoping the algorithm will pay it a little bit more love, but at least the comment section's been really kind. And that always, I think, counts for a lot, even when the views aren't where you want them to be. As long as you're getting good feedback, you're on the right track. And that's
Yeah,
the
but
hope is for the next year to kind of really keep getting the consistency closer, like starting with every month, every 3 weeks, every 2 weeks, so on, and just keep expanding, hopefully.
yeah, and I think that when it comes to YouTube, I think like one of the important things when you're at a plateau is to um, kind of like if you come out with good thumbnails and good titles and you have good content
Hmm.
and that content is in line with something popular, it's like, I mean, it's bound to do well, especially like, um, but I mean, I don't know, the YouTube algorithm's so tough. Sometimes it's just
Yeah.
doesn't, sometimes it does. But I've been editing for a couple pretty big YouTubers the last few months. Um, and I noticed something that they do when they kind of explode is they do exactly that. So a trend that I've seen between all of them is they'll find something that's relevant
Hmm.
happening now. They'll create a really like attention grabbing thumbnail and a title that's super like, like this video broke YouTube kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they always blow up.
Hmm.
So I mean, that's also something to keep in mind. But at the same time, I feel like it also depends what kind of niche you're in as well.
Yeah. I think it totally does, but I think there's always some game to be played of I mean it's like any other industry, I think. You kind of have to have that one for you, one for me mentality. And I think the best thing that you can do is to still find like as much authenticity in the one for you kind of thing, or one for them, I mean, because
Totally.
so like the Last of Us video, for example, it's not like it's not a video I was passionate about. It's just like under my old regime of trying to take forever and polish it to perfection and everything, it's like that would not have been something I would have done in that way.
Right.
But holding or like letting go of some of that precious feeling about being perfectionistic, like that's where I feel like trying to find that new sweet spot of still being passionate about something, but something that can actually have potential to reach an audience. And I think
Totally.
you have to
I mean, it's
consciously split those things. Hmm.
totally. It's so frustrating. One of the videos that I hated the most that I posted, I was like under pressure to get it out, and the thing I hated the most ended up being the most popular one. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? So it's frustrating, but sometimes you have to, focus on just putting it out.
Yeah.
So going forward, are you going to kind of move out of the video essays or kind of like oh you're still going to do those, but are you going to you said you're going to do some music stuff as well and other things?
Yeah, so the plan is to kind of first start like breaking up the video essays into other subjects. So I have a few different other video game related stuff, which is part of the other reason I thought The Last of Us was like a good, because that's like a nice halfway point. I'm talking about the game and the show, and then I can kind of pivot more. Like I
It's a
get to
good segue.
prove that I know my
Yeah,
video games as much as
totally.
movies, and then kind of really shift focus for that. And then eventually I want to make some like music video essays too. And then when I have enough money, frankly, is what is kind of the process. Like I got to get some new gear to make a proper push for music. Like I have a guitar and a microphone, and I want like that's enough, but I want a keyboard and MIDI and production and I want to get fancy with it.
When you say get into music, do you mean
Hmm.
like make content about music
Well,
or like actually
so
create?
yeah, so I've been writing songs since I was like 15. I've made a few like albums, EPs in the past, but I've never promoted them because they were just like really rough, put together for
Uh-huh.
fun. Like they sound like shit is the short and
Yeah.
simple. But I wanted, like I've always liked writing songs and making music. I've just never really had the means to do it up the way that I want to. Like
Right.
past just like a demo singer-songwriter feel, which is never like that's not the music I like. Like I like Radiohead and Fleet Fox. It's like I like big sounds,
Hmm.
and so that's the path that I'm like saving towards is getting a keyboard. I already have me and my brother kind of like co-purchased a massive MIDI library, and then it'll just be like I'll make an album, and then as far as like how that will go to YouTube, pick out a few of like the lead singles, make music videos for them, either through like filming if I can get a nice camera, because this wouldn't cut it. And this is the only camera I have for video.
Okay.
But if not, if I can't afford that, I'll figure something out for like animation style or,
Yeah, you
something
could
with
also
like
rent
still
the camera.
images. Yeah, totally. It just depends on what the budget is and like how I feel
Right.
about. But have some music videos, post those, and then I'll also post just like the full album with the chapters marked out for the songs and stuff like that. And because the hope is to just like I'm trying to do a lot of different art that exists beyond just YouTube, but I feel like YouTube is already a hub for those traditional medias too. People like Universal Studios posts their movie trailers and like the biggest
Right.
bands post their music videos. So it's like I'm kind of hoping because eventually I want to be, if the dream of all dreams comes true, I'll be writing and directing my own like feature films and like making music kind of in between that stuff. And I don't ever want to like I'm not trying to be like a touring, Foo Fighters. Like I don't want to be like the biggest band in the world. I just like making music. And
Right.
if I could find some part of my audience to support that in any way, that would be amazing.
Yeah,
But
that's super cool. And your audience is supporting you right now with, I believe, some of the streams of income that you have right now are Patreon, right? Are you still doing
mhm,
Patreon?
mhm.
Okay. And are there any other streams of income that you have? Like what are ways that you've diversified with YouTube?
So on YouTube, it was pretty much Patreon. I have a PayPal open too, which is nice for anyone who doesn't want to commit to like a monthly thing. It's just like a little online tip jar. I have done sponsorships in the past. It's been a while because I've kind of been rebuilding and I've been getting offers, but it's like, you know, I want to ease back into it and
Right.
when everything's a little bit more consistent. But that was kind of the big breakdown: ad revenue, Patreon, other donations, and sponsorships. I briefly like toyed around with merch, but I don't really know how to do that for what I do because it's all like
Hmm.
movie related, and then you're just getting into like really dangerous copyrighted material.
Yeah, yeah.
So like I never really knew how to make that jump, but that's something that a lot of other people should consider for their own stuff. And then just a lot of freelance, over the years to kind of act as that other
Hmm.
little piece of the pie. Um, but I never really found any other ways that made sense for me. I know they exist. Like I did the affiliate stuff for a little while, but I never really got much from that. Like pennies after years,
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I think it just,
Awesome.
again, it depends on what you're doing, right? Like a tech channel, man, they pop off with affiliate marketing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely think it's video essays are definitely a more tricky
Hmm.
um thing. Like there's definitely certain niches where you can just blow up like tech channels, finance channels, things
Hmm.
where like affiliates and things like that will just do really good. But your channel has had some good backing in the past. Like I'm like
Hmm.
Nord or VPN company sponsored you once, right? Audible, I
Oh,
think
I've
was
worked
or some.
with a ton over the years. Like I've worked with a bunch of different VPNs. I did Audible, Dollar Shave Club, Squarespace, Skillshare. God, like I've had a lot of really
That's
good
really cool, man.
sponsors. Yeah.
Yeah. And what's the process like when working with sponsors?
So typically, the way it kind of worked out is similar to the freelance. Like it wasn't so much me reaching out as them reaching out to me, which just happened by the nature of like getting to a point where things were steadier. Like they've obviously, I took a big hiatus, and you know, we could go into all that if you wanted, but not much to tell other than a long drought
Right.
on the channel
Right.
that inevitably hurt sponsorship relationships, viewership, all that stuff. But for a long time, I was pretty consistently getting like 50,000 views a video. And so that meant just, I mean, every month I had 20, 30 different offers rolling in. Everything from like,
Wow.
like the wallets or watches or the food delivery companies or you name it. And so for me, the process was just always trying to negotiate. I think this is where it's also really important to have friends that are doing something similar because, I mean, again, like any other industry, like the best thing you can do is be honest with your circle and talk about how much people are getting paid because
Totally.
there's a shocking amount of like underpayment and frankly exploitation from
Right.
brands that are just
Do
taking
you
advantage
do
of
you
creators.
of course we don't have to name any companies
No,
here.
yeah, yeah.
We're not going to do that. But like, do you have were there any situations where like you felt like with the negotiation side of things, you felt like they're definitely trying to take advantage of me. Like I know my worth.
Yes. I think the frustrating thing is sometimes you just don't have the negotiating power. Like for
Right.
the longest time when I was doing these sponsorships, I was still being careful and I was picking the brands that I liked and everything like that. But at the end of the day, I couldn't just cold turn them down. I needed that money to pay rent.
Exactly.
So there are times when you're just like, you gotta just take it and it sucks. But there are a few things that moving forward, I hope to avoid, and I would also recommend other people avoid as well, if possible. But things like make goods, which is basically like, the way most sponsorship contracts are kind of built is based on the expected view count.
Okay.
Or some of them do like the whole like ROI thing, like how many clicks, how many actual purchases. But more often than not, it is just views because they understand it's a commercial, and so it's not like everybody is gonna click or buy, but the views still matter. And then they kind of figure out like a CPM based on that. And more often than not, a lot of these brands demand where, say you agree to 50,000 views, they'll have like a margin of error that's acceptable, usually like within 20%. But so if you got like half, then they would necessitate the big good, which is just to have another video with the same kind of sponsor read, but without any additional pay. And,
Okay.
and it's just like, I don't like that. I don't agree with that. I think that's a dirty tactic because we do our best, but it doesn't mean that a video is going to take off. And
Totally.
like, but and because then there's never anything on the opposite end. It's never you agree to 50,000 and X amount of dollars for that, and then you get 1 million and they send you a bigger check. Like it never works the opposite way. So
Right.
it feels distinctly unfair to the creator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for aspiring YouTubers, because I know there are a
Mhm.
lot of editors and a lot of aspiring YouTubers and current YouTubers who do listen to this podcast. And that being said, for aspiring YouTubers or YouTubers, the ones who are listening, what would you say is like, I know it's different depending on your niche, but what would
Mhm.
you say is like, well, first of all, how many subscribers did you have when you started getting sponsor like offers?
I think it was around like the 10,000 mark, honestly.
Okay.
Yeah.
And from like 10,000 to 100K, like in between, like what do you think is a fair amount for people to be playing around with?
Well, so this is something that I'm still trying to totally get a grasp on.
Hmm.
But so I would say like uh, for me, the price that I had been at, and I don't know how this has changed, in like the last year or whatever.
Right.
But I used to land anywhere between 1,000 and 2,000 for a sponsor of a fifty
Okay.
thousand view estimate.
And how many subscribers were you at for that
Uh,
amount?
Somewhere in between that 10 and 100, like,
Okay. Cool.
60 to 80 was for a lot of
Okay.
it. Uh,
Okay.
and again, because the big thing that I would say is way more than subscribers, it's the consistent view count or your total view
Totally.
average. Because usually what they even do, they have someone that crunch the numbers. They'll take your last 10 uploads, add them all up, divide to get that average. And then that's usually kind of where they base it. And it's also why if you can, the best thing, basically, yeah, the subscribers don't really determine anything. And I think the longer all of us are at this, like the more we realize that it is just
Right.
all about the consistent view count. And so like if you have 1,000 subscribers, but every video hits 100,000 views, like you'll be able to negotiate much higher than someone with the inverse. Like if you have 100K
Right.
subs, but only like 1,000 views a video, you're not going to get anything. You'll be lucky to get like an affiliate link that pays you a few bucks every time,
Right.
And so I think the biggest thing that, people should focus on is trying to build consistent relationships with a brand, especially because the make good stuff is just sadly kind of a part of it until you get to a certain point, and have more negotiating power. So it's just in your best interest to get like a multi-video deal. You usually do
Okay,
take a
cool.
loss a little bit in terms of, because they're buying like a package deal. It's like anything else. If you buy it in bulk, the individual price goes down, but then it kind of covers you for those inconsistencies that are pretty inevitable for most creators.
Yeah,
Because
totally.
it's all over the place, and the more that you commit, to that higher end and then can't meet up to that, that's when the stress really starts to come in and the pressure and the
Yeah.
like, you're not delivering, what's going on? And it's like, of course you can never answer that. No one can. No one knows why something didn't do well, but because someone's job is to ask those questions, you get asked them. But
Yeah,
I think that's the
exactly.
other part too, to look out for. A lot of the time, with sponsorships, you're getting approached by like these middlemen companies that are just the facilitator between you and the brand, and then they take a cut. And so, if
Right.
possible, the best thing to do is form a direct relationship with someone at that company,
Right.
like someone
Instead
at
of working with any
Squarespace,
agencies or
right?
anything.
Because you don't know how
Okay.
much they're taking a cut, and they'll never tell you if you ask.
Yeah.
You
And
know.
and have you ever thought about working with a manager? Or because I know a lot of YouTubers do have managers.
I actually did for a few years, and the thing that happened for me, and I can't speak to other people's experience. He just, he was great at like helping negotiate on my behalf, but at the end of the day, he didn't like bring in anything that wasn't already there, and
Okay.
so that was kind of where I lost interest in the manager
And drew the
idea.
line. Yeah.
Because it's like
So
then at that point, if they're just handling emails and stuff, like if I'm
you
still the
can
one
do that.
bringing it all in, I can answer an
Right.
email,
Right.
and he doesn't need to
Totally.
get 10% or whatever, right? Like, yeah,
Totally. Yeah, I totally understand that. I would have done the exact same thing.
yeah.
Have you ever thought about, I mean, again, it's completely dependent on if it would resonate with your demographic or not. But have you ever thought about coming out with like a product, like an editing course or
Yeah.
plugins or anything you have?
So
I
this
mean,
is
I don't know how it
actually
would work with your
mhm.
demographic, but I
part
mean, I
of
personally would love to see that.
Part of my long-term plan, is to build something like that. Especially, I mean, it's impossible to work for Tyler and not like think about that because he's
Yeah,
been very successful with it. And so the truth is, what I want to do first is like, like you got to build these things by step. And so first is getting the
totally.
solid foundation again, consistent viewership again, like consistent presence of making YouTube videos again, rather
Hmm.
than like being away for 3, 4 months and then dropping a
Yeah.
video out of nowhere. And then the kind of next stage of that is, hiring an editor or hopefully a few.
Hmm.
Because I'll always write my own videos. That's just kind of like a personal thing that I want to stick
Right.
with. But having other people help edit would certainly go a long way to me getting out
Right.
videos faster. And once I have like an editor that I really trust, I do want to put together my own. I feel like almost dirty calling it a course or whatever, but I feel like I've gone through all of the like the treacherous path of figuring all this out on your own, and I have like a shocking amount of knowledge about what goes in. I mean, it's been a decade basically at this point that I've
Yeah.
been doing this
And it's
stuff.
not it's not dirty at all. Don't think of it like that at all because like for me, I'm completely on board with courses because it's
Hmm.
the thing. It's like the I know how much time it takes to try to figure it out on your own, and to be
Yeah,
able to buy a course that shows you that in a matter of weeks is
yeah.
100% worth it. There's nothing dirty. It's
No, and I think
you're,
part of it is my price point would be a lot lower than a lot of other courses. I would charge like 100, $200 for it max,
yeah,
and
but that's a super good
oh, that
price.
would be a steal. If I could
It's
pay
still,
200
yeah.
bucks at the start to learn all that I know now, I would in a
Yeah.
heartbeat. And
And
that's
I've
kind of
bought
how I
it
see it.
just so you know,
Yeah.
I've purchased courses for that much and
Hmm.
much more.
Oh yeah.
And courses for that much, editing courses, most of them were terrible. I
Yeah.
was so bummed out. So like, yeah,
Yeah. Well, so
I
the
mean,
idea of it would be kind of to like be a nice like one size fits all of
mhm,
like how to confidently build to 100K subscribers on YouTube. And it would run
that would be
through the full thing of, like how you get started with your microphone, you know, what kind of cameras to be looking at. Like it would be pretty comprehensive of gear, tools, all the software you're gonna, all the software you're gonna need, everything, because that is in and of itself a complete headache. And I know a decent amount about all that stuff because of just years of doing all this research myself. Because I was always operating on a very tight budget. So, you know, it was always about finding the best bang for your buck. And so I want
Yeah,
to share
I
that
know,
with
I know, I know,
people.
I know it well.
Yeah. But there are ways you got to dig deep to find some of this stuff.
Yeah,
And you'd be surprised how much stuff you pay like $100 for this thing versus 110 here. And this thing will last you 10 years. This is disposable in a week, you know? And then
yeah,
it would kind
totally.
of run through the full thing of, you know, like writing a video, editing a video, doing like it wouldn't be like specifically tutorial because I think that can be found from plenty of people who are way smarter than I am. So
Right.
I would focus on what I think that I have to offer, which is
Hmm.
the artistic side of it, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
and I think that something you have to offer, which is something that I've been specifically working on a lot lately, is uh there's so many, like, I don't know if you've heard of Mr. Beastification, like so many like
Mm,
Mr. Beast type of editors and videos coming out.
hmm
But like you stand out in a very unique way in the sense that you can create things. You know how to work After Effects well. You can create motion graphics. You can really execute any vision that comes along.
hmm
And like that's still a skill I really want to dial in more because I want to be able to stand out in that retrospect.
Yeah.
And I've had a hard time. After Effects is so difficult. I've had a hard
hmm
time taking the next step into it because
hmm
it's like I want to execute certain things, but I just, I can't figure it out for the life of me. And certain YouTube tutorials, they just don't exist on the
Yeah.
matter, and I'm trying to figure it out and stuff. And like, I think that's a really unique way that you specifically stand out is you're able to execute artistic visions on the sense of like the motion graphic sides of things that like a lot of people can't do.
hmm Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate it. And that would be like the focus, because I do think there are people with far more technical knowledge of how to use it effectively. But
Right.
at the end of the day, it's like we were talking about earlier. I don't think that matters half as much as like the artistic side. You know, you don't have to be, I mean, hell, like I think one of the most perfect examples is like Casually Explained, if you've found that channel. The most simple animation ever. It's not even animation. They're comics with
Yeah.
stick figures, but it's like,
Right.
you know, he had his vision and he knew how to implement it in a way that was unique to him and
Totally.
that serves the whole vibe. Like it all works together. And I think that is just what you have to do. Like in the level of professionalism, it just
Hmm.
depends on what you're trying to do. You know, if you're
Right.
trying to match Kurt's Gazette, like good luck. Like that will be a task. But
Yeah.
you know, if you're trying to be like CGP Grey or something, like that's easier to wrap your head around.
Yeah. Yeah. So what would you like? Because I mean, there's so many editors coming up, and especially in different countries too, where like they charge a lot less. What would you say? How would you tell an editor like if someone was like, "How should I stand out?" What would you tell them ways that they should go about standing out from your average basic editor in India or Bangladesh or something that charges next to nothing? You know what I mean?
Yeah, $5 for a 20-minute
Yeah.
video or something. Oh, I've seen
Yeah.
it. I think, at least in my experience, and you know, again, who knows how applicable that is at like the widest base, but I do think the best thing that you can do as an editor is to have your own creations too. Uh, because I don't know, I guess I would kind of compare it to like, you know, if you're trying to be a filmmaker or like a director, how do you get people to just trust you to give you that money with someone else's script and say you're the guy? If you write your own script and you make your own thing, then all of a sudden it's a different story. And so I think
Totally.
like creating your own projects out of thin air if need be, you know, and whatever that is, doing like a silly fan edit for like a, you know, a music video for a TV show or something, but like anything that can start to show your creativity. And because truthfully, I don't think there's any way to break into freelance without having to work for free to some extent, whether it's on that personal level or take gigs just to get exposure.
I completely agree. I
Yeah,
100% live by the free to fee method where you do one for free to show what you got to get your foot in the door, and then
100%.
you edit. Like, I don't know if you've ever heard of the fitness channel Athlete X.
Mm-mm.
Well, they are like have 13 million subscribers, and they're
Wow.
one of my clients.
Okay.
and I got my foot in the door by offering free work.
Nice.
You see, like,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of people, especially in the creative field, who like refuse to do free work first. But I'm always like, you get the client, your dream clients, by just giving them free work first and
Yeah.
showing what you can do. So I completely agree with that.
I've often, put together, not that they've worked out 100% of the time, but, you put together like a little pitch, like you edit something just on your own volition and you just send it in. Don't do like a
Yeah,
whole hour-long thing for them if you're doing it for
right,
free, but just show what you're capable of. Even if
right,
it's like a 10,
exactly.
20-second thing, just be like, look at what I can offer.
Yeah. And
And because I
another thing I've
think, oh,
done,
sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say another thing I've done too, which has really worked, was exactly what you said, like creating a 1 minute video um, for them, just
Mhm.
showing you what you can do. And then I record a loom where I just break it down for them, like why I made these decisions, why I think that this decision is better than what you guys have done in the
Mhm.
past for engagement, say, and stuff like that. And like that goes a really long way.
Well, because I think the best thing you can do as a freelance editor is to do your best to like put yourself in the shoes of the client because
Yeah.
this is their brand that they've spent years cultivating. They've often spent thousands of dollars investing in this to get cameras, to get editing software, you name it, to hire other people. They are protective of this thing and they do not want to just hire some random guy off the street who's like, I can edit for you. Like I recently just kind of dipping my toes in to see, what I could find on Reddit for editors. Like I put a little kind of job listing, and the amount of people who clearly didn't even read the post and are just like,
Oh
I
yeah.
can edit for you. And it's like, you're never going to get anywhere that way. Because
Hmm.
you think about it from their side, you're one of 100 applicants. You know what I
Right.
mean? And if you have just like a written resume as an editor, that
Yeah.
helps nobody, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I definitely I made my resume very very like video-esque, where you can see
Mhm.
all the thumbnails, you can click on it and all that.
Mhm.
And then what goes a really long way is, because what you said, I've done the same thing. I've needed help with shorts before, and I was like trying to hire someone,
Mhm.
and I actually I made a second job posting and put at the end, make sure you start your when you reply to me, make sure you tell me your favorite color before you tell me why you'd be, just so
Yeah.
I could
Yeah.
tell who actually read through the thing or not. And like three people maybe told me the color out of
Yeah.
like 50, and I was just like so disappointed. But um, something that goes a long way is, like I said, either sending an audio message with the test edit, or of actual recording like this on something like
Mhm.
Loom, where they can actually put a face to it and like,
Yeah.
okay, this guy really cares. This guy is taking the effort to do this. This is the kind of guy I want working on my videos. And
100%.
I think what you said is gold. You need to really put yourself in the shoes of the client. That's a really, really good piece of advice.
Thank you. I mean, it's the only thing I've ever known from it is being on
Yeah.
both sides. Like, you really get that perspective that I think a lot of
Hmm.
people who only exist on one side or the other. And that is just another thing as an editor that's like one of the frustrations is dealing with clients who've never been editors. But
Right.
so it's like the more you can be comfortable on both sides of that, like the better off you'll be.
Yeah. Have you ever listened to Hayden Smith, Logan Paul's editor?
Yeah. I've actually chatted
Hey,
with him a little bit.
oh, you have?
Yeah, we are
Awesome.
all part of like a little video essayist like Discord server. We just had like a little Discord video chat a couple weeks ago.
That's super cool, man. Yeah, I
Yeah,
love his content on
he's
YouTube.
amazing and he's a brilliant guy. He knows
And
his stuff.
he's really inspired me in the field of editing, and like really like taking like focusing on the psychology of editing, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
That's
Yeah.
really cool. So have you consumed any of his content on YouTube?
I've watched a little bit of his podcast. I've definitely watched, like some of like the highlight reel stuff of like what he's done for the bigger YouTubers. And yeah,
Yeah.
I mean he's incredible.
Do you ever focus on like the psychology of editing, which is like his whole thing, you know what I mean? Do you ever
Hmm.
focus on that in any of your edits?
I think it just naturally seeps in with,
Okay.
because to me, I think psychology, storytelling, all of that stuff goes hand in hand. It's all about thinking about, like I always loved Tarantino's kind of breakdown of how he likes
Hmm.
to write his scripts as like he's like a conductor for an orchestra, and he's like the audience is his orchestra. He's like, now you laugh, now you cry, now you cover your face with shock,
Right.
and I think that that's like the most, I guess, intellectual about it that I get because I don't have, a psychologist's understanding of psychology, but I think it is just all about trying to tap into what intended emotion. You know, you have to have intent, whatever that might be. Like, it's not always about making people laugh, but it is something that you're trying to
Totally.
attain. Hmm.
Totally, man. Well, awesome, dude. Well, I really appreciate you coming on today. And
Yeah.
for the people who want to find you, where can they find you?
So you can search for me by my name, Daniel Netzel, Netzel. Not the most memorable name, but it's the one I was born with. And I think I still come up if you search Film Radar, because to my knowledge, no one else has that name on YouTube yet. But yeah, just Daniel Netzel on YouTube would be the place I would send people to.
And definitely go support him on Patreon or leave him a tip on PayPal
That would
because
be appreciated.
he's creating solid content.
Well, thank
Dude,
you,
thank you
man.
so much for coming on today. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, man. Thank you for having me on.